Yo, what's going on, guys? It's me, KingStix. In this video, I want to show you one of the best bulky Tanky Warwick builds I've ever used. I did it recently, and it gives Warwick a lot of scalability in a team comp where you need to be a lot more tanky. A lot of the times you can get away with going bruiser, but if you need to be tanky, I think this build has a lot of potential, and I'll be showing you that here in this game. Traditionally, Warwick does struggle to scale, and with this build, if your team does need a tank and your team does have damage, I think it is a great option. A lot of aspects of the build are still the same. You're going to be getting your Tiamat into boots, into your full jungle item, into tier 2 boots. At that point, you typically want to finish your Titanic Hydra, and then after that, if the enemy team has a good mix of AP and AD like they do in this game, going for a Gargoyle Stoneplate is amazing. This is particularly the best if you're already in the teamfight stage in teamfights. With the amount of damage reduction your E gives you on Warwick, combine that with the extra health, 80 armor and 80 magic resist from the Gargoyle Stoneplate, you're pretty much unkillable. At that point, you get the Warmogs, and if you're level 14 and up, you should have 3000 plus HP. If you do plan on going for this build, you can switch out your warrior for Cinderhulk instead. However, I prefer the warrior for the 10% CDR. For my final item, I went for Frozen Gauntlets because I really like the CDR on them, and they give a nice bit of damage. If the enemy team had more auto attack base, hyper auto attack base champions like Tryndamere and Jax, going for a Frozen Heart would have been preferred, or going for a Locket. But in this game, since they had tons of AD, I already had MR for my Gargoyle, I really felt like Iceborne Gauntlets were the way to go for the extra bit of damage, the extra bit of CC, and of course the 20% CDR. With this build, you do end up with 40% CDR, which is amazing on Warwick, 10% from your warrior, 10% from Mogs, and 20% from the Frozen Gauntlets. So what you end up with this build is an absurd amount of health, around 3500, 40% CDR, and 200 plus AD, with massive bonus on hit damage with your Titanic Hydra and burst from your Frozen Gauntlets. It turns you into a super high priority threat where if the enemies ignore you, you're going to pretty much one-shot their carries, and if they do hit you, they're going to have a whole lot of trouble trying to deal with you. A lot of you are probably wondering why this build is so armor heavy considering the enemy team has a Teemo, Katarina, and 𝐒𝐿𝐂𝐂. The thing is, with the MR alone from the Gargoyle Stoneplate, I'll easily be able to cover their flat MR penetration. From the health it gives as well, I can tank, and with my E. In general, you want to lean towards armor since armor benefits you against barons, dragons, and turrets. Meanwhile, MR does not. So if I end up in a turret dive situation where I'm tanking turrets, having all that stacked MR won't be doing me a whole lot of good. This build is more advantageous if the enemy was more AD heavy. That way I'd be getting even more value out of my armor. If they were completely AD, I definitely would have swapped out my Gargoyle Stoneplate for a Dead Man's Plate after I had my jungle item, tier 2 boots, and Titanic Hydra completed. Something I really like about this build is the main flow of Warwick's Power Spike, which is hitting your warrior or Cinderhulk into your Titanic Hydra, is completely unfazed because you're still going to be rushing those items at the same exact pace. So your early and mid game dominance, allowing you to secure constant dragons, will still be completely intact. This is just an alternative route to run as the game drags out longer and longer since this game went past the 35-minute mark. With that being said, it is important to try to end your games earlier on Warwick since he does objectively fall off compared to other champions. But if the game does keep dragging out, this is a responsible and reasonable build against most enemy team comps. Something that is worth mentioning is against this very specific enemy team with the Teemo and the Katarina and the 𝐒𝐿𝐂𝐂, they have a lot of repeat damage. With the Katarina's resets, her ult, the 𝐒𝐿𝐂𝐂's repeat abilities such as his W and his ulti, and the Teemo poison and ult. If I would have swapped out my Frozen Gauntlets for an adaptive helm, that probably would have been best because in these late game team fights, I do start to take a little bit more damage and a lot of repeated mage damage. But other than that, I think this build really does hold up as long as the enemy team doesn't have multiple dot mages, damage over time mages, or repeat damage mages like Teemo Rise, Katarina Brand, Malzahar, things like that. But like I said, in the early and mid game, having a preference more towards armor is more advantageous. It allows you to do aggressive turret dives, and since Warwick has a lot of CC anyways, if you are performing these turret dives properly, you won't be taking much magic damage from your opponent since they won't be able to fight back. Alright, it's time to show you how this build works in action here a bit. So I've built myself and my team up a lead off of the early game, abusing Lee Sin, which is usually an easy matchup for Warwick. I now have my Gargoyle Stoneplate, so I'm looking for a team fight as my team pushes up through the bot lane. I know the enemies are going to want to contest this blue buff, but I'm not afraid to tank. I want to make sure I'm near 3 of them before I use my Gargoyle Stone Plate, and I happen to use my E at the same time since they all happen to focus me at that exact moment. As you can see, I'm not really taking any damage even though I'm fighting 4 of them, and 3 of them are doing almost pure magic damage to me even though I have very little MR. I easily survive their burst, allowing my team to back me up and get off lots of damage. Then I can simply heal up off a Gromp back to over half HP and rejoin the fight. Once I get Warmogs, this will be even more effective since I can get back to full HP without even needing to attack anything in roughly 8 to 10 seconds. And of course, we're also getting it for the 10% CDR and the massive synergy it has with Gargoyle Stone Plate, since once again, if you are near 3 people, when you activate your gargoyles, you get double your HP, which is absolutely insane. Something that is extremely important to know is you should not be using this build if the enemy team has a Vayne. Vayne does true damage, so even if you have all this armor, even when you pop your Gargoyle Stone Plate, her true damage is max health % based, so she'll be tearing through you at nearly the exact same speed. So if you are playing against a Vayne, do not go for this build. Instead, opt for items like Locket in late games in Teamfight, or opt for more damage to try to one-shot her, getting more AD styled items. Normally though, just having Warrior and Titanic Hydra should be more than enough for your damage items on Warwick to allow you to pretty much one-shot squishies, or at least force that threat to where they can't overstep because you'll tear them up really fast. Remember, this build performs in the late game, but you will need your teammates behind you because it is prioritizing tankiness over damage in the late game. So in team fights, make sure you have at least 1 teammate behind you, otherwise you'll be very sad after your gargoyle wears off. The enemies are going to start to push up. They're wondering if we're going to start Baron, so I pop my W, run out, make Jhin very uncomfortable, attach, get behind 3 of them, get a double fear, proc my gargoyle, and as you can tell, I'm tanking just fine the turret, Teemo, Vel'Koz, and I still have a lot of health. And when I pull off, I can easily heal back up off of a monster camp. Something important to mention is if you do go for Warrior over Cinderhulk, you will need level 16 before you can hit your 3k health power spike for your Warmog unique passive. You can negate this by going for a health rune, then you should be able to hit it at level 15 or maybe even 14. But if you are really serious about getting that Warmog passive, going for a Cinderhulk will allow you to hit it much earlier on, to where you'll never run into the less than 3k problem by the time you get your Warmog. Or if the enemy team doesn't have any magic damage, you can easily opt out of your Gargoyle Stone Plate instead of a Dead Man's, in which case when you get your Warmogs you'll easily have 3k HP as well. A big reason why I felt like I wanted Frozen Gauntlets in this game over an MR item is because the whole enemy team was squishy, so I felt like if I could get my hands on one of them, I would have the damage to kill them with the Iceborne Gauntlet, since it gives you some burst on your ability cast, and it also gives you the slow to help you stay on top of them. The main concept of this build is to give some reasonable tank items in various situations that Warwick can build and still perform quite well on, as long as you're not playing against a Vayne, because once again, Vayne turns any tank into mincemeat, and at that point you might as well go for pretty much a one-shot Warwick build that is utilizing a Guardian Angel. We're shoving up pretty hard on the suckers, but as you're about to see, Teemo is a champion that is really hard to close out on, because if it's just you and not your whole team working together to break his shrooms, they'll wipe out your minions, they'll stop your pushes by getting you all low on health, and even if you are healing a lot of HP back with your Warmog, oftentimes your teammates won't have those same healing capabilities unless your team basically has a Soraka. So as we're trying to end here, we don't really have a way to finish, so I decided, you know what, we're all pretty much half health, we don't really have all of our ultimates, enemies are all spawning in, we might as well back. Things are about to get really nasty. If we just step up, if 1 or 2 of us die from Vel'Koz, this could swing things in a very bad way. So of course I try to pull off while getting as many teammates out as I can, and I pop my Gargoyle Stone Plate. They can't quite pinch me off, and at that point I'm pretty sure they got spooked. They didn't understand what was going on, so they just decided it was best to go ahead and let me be. So at this point I'm all the way back to nearly full HP. We can go ahead and re-engage with my ultimate or just shove top lane. A big reason why I didn't want to end up and get Trinity Force, even though at this point I could easily go for it, is Warwick's W gives so much attack speed regardless once they are half health or below. Your attack speed is going to be overfilling, and the value you're getting out of Trinity Force is relatively low. Trinity Force is more of an early mid-game cheese item on Warwick that is extremely cost ineffective, and in general I don't recommend unless you're just doing it for the memes. This game kept dragging out forever and ever. The team coordination on our team wasn't great, and once again in solo queue, ending against a Teemo late game isn't the easiest thing in the world. This last team fight that I'm showing you, I'm using a brute force method for ending the game since they don't have any base turrets. Essentially my goal is to push the enemy team off by wasting their spells and allowing my teammates space. This is pretty easy since the enemy team doesn't have any tanks to match me. I can just keep pushing them back. I don't in general recommend this strategy since it can leave you stranded if your teammates don't follow you up very well, but in this case I felt like it was a solid strategy to help preserve my team. So I walk in, I'm tanking with my E. I do gargoyle stone plate a little bit early, but the amount of spells and aggro that I soak, I set up a really easy cleanup for my team, which is at the end of the day what you're hoping to do as a tank. That is it for this bulky tanky Warwick build guide. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I have open coaching back up this month for precise details and pricing. Check the description or the pinned comment down below. I'm also going to be streaming here on January 23rd. I'd love to see you guys there. Come check it out. My name is KingStix. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. So bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.